Hooday, Bengal fans. This is the Bengals Pulse, the heartbeat of our Cincinnati Bengals. We got my man, Zim Hooday, in the house tonight. What's up, my man, Zim?
What's up? As soon
And
as you said that, there's a plane traveling right over
I
my
can hear
head.
it.
Sorry about that. I didn't want to
And our
just.
guy, Mon, the Fire Mon, Abul Hassan, is here for a special edition of the Bengals Pulse Roundtable. We are going to be talking about these top 5 lists that have come out for the Cincinnati Bengals. A list that our buddy of the show, Jay Morrison, put together. Some very interesting lists. I'm excited to talk about these tonight because I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about these lists. I know I have my opinion. We want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Hooday, everybody. We appreciate you joining this special edition of the Bengals Pulse Roundtable. Again, Zim, it's great to see you, buddy. How's everything been going, man, with yourself? I know you've been a busy guy.
Doing pretty good, man. I'm just rocking out, getting ready for the season. I'm really excited, to get to this next, level of Bengals, fandom, and we got the season right around the corner. I'm just, outside of that, everything's good, family straight. So I'm just in good spirits, and I appreciate you guys having me on here tonight.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. Mon, how you doing, buddy?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I am. Yeah. Doing all right. I'm glad we weren't live about 5 minutes ago. It's all good.
Listen,
I'm glad we're talking about this stuff now. I need help. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, you do. We live in Florida, and Mon told us right before we went on the air that his air conditioning went out, and that down in Florida it's hell. I mean, I don't even know how else to say it. It is hell. So
I'm glad you didn't repeat what I said.
So we were gonna repeat what you were gonna say. Eric, you want to go ahead and get us started? Let's get these lists going, guys. Comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think about these lists. Give us your top 5 on each one of these. Eric, how many lists are there? Are we doing 5 tonight? Is that right?
I think we got 5. We'll do whatever we have time for,
Okay.
wherever the conversation goes. I know there's some very polarizing ones out there. And like you said, a big shout out to Jay Morrison for putting these together. PFN, Pro Football Network, does have some of these screenshots, which we're going to show here and discuss. But Jay's got a lot of great information on his articles. He actually does a top 10 on these pictures that we're all seeing. We're only seeing the top 5, so we don't get the full scope of the whole article. But very, very thoughtful pieces. It wasn't lighthearted in his choices, and so it's good to get this Wincinnati roundtable going because, Zem and I aren't as old as Jake and Mon, so we need to know, is the 81 team really better than the 2005 team? For people that actually experienced it. So here we are.
All right. Well, let's get this thing started. Let's get this party started, so to speak. First list we're going to do is the best teams, and this is guys. Honestly, when I look at this list, it is a list of what could have been. Right? I mean, these teams. 3 of them in the top 5 came up just short of winning a Super Bowl. Every game, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, all heartbreaking losses. Mon and I, unfortunately, got to experience all 3 of these losses, but some very good Bengal football teams mixed in between, and we're going to talk about all of them. Zim, let's start with you. When you look at this list, do you like the way that this list is set up? Are there any teams that you think might be missing on this list? Let's go ahead and start with you, and then Mon, you follow up.
It's a tough choice, or it's tough because 2005. I don't know if it's the 2005 versus 2015 show once again for me, right? We're just reliving that. But the reason why to me is because the 2005 one, you could. I read some of Jay's piece. You can show me whatever you want. If the 2005 team had a chance to just have their starting quarterback there, that team is going to a Super Bowl. I don't know if they win it. I don't care who's in the path. That to me, as long as I've been doing this Bengals stuff, that's my best chance and best opportunity we ever had to win the Super Bowl up until 2021. Because remember, 81, 88, I'm not even on Earth yet. So 2005, maybe that's the nostalgia portion, with it a little bit to me. But that was a really good chance. And I think if a healthy Carson Palmer is there, they go to a bowl. I think the work that they did in the division that year, steamrolling the Steelers early in the year and stuff, the writing is right there on the wall. Carson Palmer's leading the league in touchdowns, Pro Bowler, all these different things, versus Dalton, primetime 2015. Even if he's there, I don't know. I always say that some people are running to, they'd be like, oh, that team would have went to a Super Bowl. I don't know. I saw him on primetime that year. I think he only won one game in primetime. He was 1-2 or 1-3, if my memory serves me correctly, in 2015, which is probably his best. To me, that's not his best season, but that's what most would consider his best season. Even in that, he still didn't play well in primetime games. I think he went to that Steelers playoff game for sure. But outside of that, I just can't vouch for it like that. And we could go and look through the whole team as much as we want, and we'll find one thing strong here, one thing, we could do that back and forth. I just know if Carson Palmer's there, I think you have a ring on your finger. I can't say the same about 2015.
Okay. All right, Mon. I think you're muted, Mon.
There you go. Sorry, the dogs are in here.
You're good. You're good.
Having a rough night. Okay. I don't have a problem with the top five. And Zim, good point. The 2005 team was absolutely loaded. Probably the funnest Bengal team. If they had a list of the funnest, I would say 2005 is number one. Real quick, the 1988 team, I remember them very well. They started off great, pass heavy. Eddie Brown, Boomer was gunning the ball. But, Boomer hurt his shoulder week 10. They became run heavy after that. They started running the ball because his shoulder was fried. They were leaking oil towards the end of the season. And that Super Bowl was close, but they were really outplayed in that Super Bowl. Some turnovers helped them out. The 81 team was very dominant. 4 turnovers in the Super Bowl. That should have been our first Super Bowl victory. We should have a Lombardi from that. If it wasn't for the turnovers, we dominated that game. That was a great team. But about the 81 team, a lot of great players from the 70s. The Bengals were good in the 70s. They were 11-3, 10-4, 10-4. They could just never get over the hump, get past the Steelers. And then all of a sudden, those good players, leaked over in the early 80s, and they pieced it together. They went to a Super Bowl. To me, the best Bengal team ever is a 2022 team. They didn't make it to a Super Bowl. They won 10 in a row. I was convinced going into the playoffs, hey, man, we're going to our second Super Bowl. It's over. We're going to win. And Collins gets hurt. Kappa gets hurt. I'm telling you right now, if those guys were healthy, we beat the Chiefs 2 years in a row in Arrowhead, and we were going to win the Super Bowl. To me, the 2022 team was the best Bengal team I've ever seen. Won 10 in a row. I'm telling you, man, that was, and I know you guys aren't going to agree, 2015 is probably the most talented Bengal team I've ever seen. They didn't have the quarterback, but if you look at that roster, offense and defense, there were some massive players, 3 Hall of Famers on that roster in 2015. But 2022 is the best Bengal team I've ever seen.
All right, well, I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna say 1988 is the best Bengal team, and again, like you, Mon, I remember that team very vividly. It was a dominating football team. If you guys didn't get a chance to watch it, again, that's why, to me, some of those guys that are on that football team belong in the Ring of Honor before some of the other guys that we're going to get to that list shortly. But that team was just dominant, and it led the AFC in almost every offensive category, guys. This is a team that threw for 3,600, 3,700 yards and ran for almost 3,000 yards. This 1988 team, guys, and Mon said it, if it was not for Boomer's injury, I know the Crumry thing. I remember when he broke in the Super Bowl, I was just sitting in a corner crying. I was devastated. Tim Crumry that year, was our leading tackler from the nose position. He had almost 160 tackles. People don't realize how good Tim Crumry was. But offensively in that Super Bowl, we struggled. Boomer struggled. If we would have won that Super Bowl, Jim Breach would have been the MVP. That's how bad the offense struggled. Obviously, there were some other things. Lewis Billups dropping that interception was devastating. But that team was dominant, guys. Listen, it lost 4 games, and 3 of those 4 losses was by a total of like 15 or 16 points. I mean, this is a team that easily could have run the table if it was not for a blowout loss early in the season. This team was dominant, guys. It was good. The 88 team by far is the best Bengal team of all time, even better than the 2022 team. I'm going to go 88, and I'm going to tell you, too, obviously, Zim, I agree with you about 05. I think 05 is better than 15. I will talk about 05. I don't want to get back into that discussion. But 05, if Carson Palmer is healthy, that team wins the Super Bowl. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think they even have any issues except for maybe the Colts. I mean, they're going to run the table in the playoffs. They were that good. Defense, I know, gave up a lot of yards, and we lost to the Colts late on in the season. Later in that season, I think we lost to the Colts. It was a shootout. There was like 40-something to 30-something. That 05 team was very, very good. But let's not throw aside the 2021 team. I think people forget how good that team was with a terrible offensive line. I mean, what that team was able to accomplish offensively, Joe threw for over 4,000 yards. Chase had almost 1,500 yards. Joe Mixon had 1,200-something yards. I mean, offensively, that team was dominant, and it probably was one of the worst offensive lines in the last decade in the entire NFL. It was so bad. The 81 team, that's the first team I ever watched. That's the team that made me a Bengal fan. First game I ever watched was at Freezer Bowl, that 27-7 win against the Chargers. That 81 team, too, guys, it was really good. Ken Anderson won the MVP, just like Boomer won the MVP in 88. Ken Anderson was dominant that year for a league that just wasn't really known to throw the football a lot. Ken Anderson had an incredible season. So my list goes more like 88, 21, 81. I think those have to be the top 3 because they did make it to a bowl. But obviously 22 and 05 are right there for me as far as 4 and 5 goes. Thoughts?
22. You talk about dominating. Hold on.
Good.
21. They were wildly inconsistent. Remember, they were 4-4. I remember doing our show and people were crashing out telling us how bad we were. I remember when we beat the Titans in the playoff game and I had to log on and talk people off a ledge. They were like, dog, we're lucky to get out of here. Joe Burrow's going to get killed. After he had just got sacked 9 times. I get the numbers overall, but think about how many games did Joe Burrow have to bail us out with just a bomb to Jamar Chase right before halftime. In contrast, the 22 team, dude,
dominant
games where I'm telling people we could have beat this team by 40, 50 points or something crazy. Mm-hmm. Y'all remember when we played the Falcons, he nailed the ball out like at the 5-yard line, like, and he could have broke all the records. We had 3 wide receivers with 100 yards in the same game. In the Panthers game, he was up 35-0. And then we put our backups in and they made the score look cute or whatever. They were beating the dog crap out of all of those teams on that 10-game win streak. We got robbed out of the Hamlin game. We go and get robbed out of the coin flip and all this weird stuff happened, and they still were winning, and they still were tearing teams apart. I got 22 ahead of 21. 21, even leaving the Super Bowl, I wasn't even crushed because I was like, man, I'm just happy to be here. It's awesome to be a Bengal. We'll be right back. 22, me losing that Kansas City one was the worst taste I ever had in my mouth. First of all, it was cold as I don't know what. But the second part was I'm like, God, people will never realize how good that team is. And that team was way better than that Chiefs team. Whereas in 21, I thought the Chiefs team was better than that 21 team. We just came back with a miraculous comeback. I got 22 still ahead of 21. Don't
you guys think, let me ask you this, Mon, don't you think though there's something to say about a 21 team that, yes, they did not beat teams the same way as a 22 team. And I agree, the 22 team is definitely in the top 5. But isn't there something to say, guys, when the 21 team goes into the number 1 seed Tennessee Titans and beats them? I mean, a game where they fight and they scrap and they do everything they have to do to win that football game. And then they go into KC and beat Patrick Mahomes for the first time and only time that Mahomes has lost in Kansas City in the playoffs, right? I mean,
Jake, listen.
They beat them twice, remember?
Yeah, they did. Everything you just said. Yeah, everything you just said. That month of football in 2021 where we went on that run, beat the Titans, that's the best month of my sports life. The best month of my sports life. But I'm just telling you, my opinion, 2022, Zim, you said it perfectly. That 10-game winning streak, don't forget. Remember, when the Bengals were 4-4, the Bengals had the hardest stretch in the NFL. The remaining schedule is like top 2 remaining in the NFL. The Ravens had the easiest. There's no way the Bengals are going to make it up against the Ravens. The Bengals went on a 10-game winning streak against some of the best teams in football. The best teams in football, and they were smoking them. Yeah. And that was the most dominant stretch of Bengals football I've ever seen, ever. Listen, that 88 team was so exciting, but they were leaking major oil at the end of the season. They really were.
They were, no doubt.
And the 81 team, hey man, that should have been our Super Bowl. They were that good. They really were, but the turnovers killed them. But 2022 was the most dominant 2.5, 3 months of Bengal football I've ever seen. And I'm telling you, Collins and Kappa and Tyler Boyd getting hurt in the first half of that AFC Championship game killed us. It absolutely killed us.
The coin flip killed us because that stupid game is what got Kappa hurt.
Yes.
And just Kappa playing in that game, I think we win that game.
You're right. I agree. And guys, think about this too, and then we'll move on to the next list. But those 3 Super Bowl losses, right? I mean, first of all, the 88 team is in that NFL list of top 5 of the greatest teams to never win a Super Bowl. I mean, the 88 team, guys, is the best Bengal team of all time. There's no doubt about it. They were that good. But when you think about how the fourth quarter was played out in all of those games, in all of those Super Bowls, one play that you can name in each one of those Super Bowls where we're talking about 3 Super Bowl wins instead of 3 Super Bowl losses. Just incredible. I think all 3 of those teams are great. And I agree, guys, that 22 Bengal team, those 10 games, that's the best Bengal football I've ever watched in 43 years. It's incredible.
Yeah. I just to throw my opinion out there, 88 will always hold a place in my heart because that's one of the first real games that I remember. Unfortunately, it's one of the, I remember ending the game in heartbreak because here we were so close and we lost it. But 2022 is really going to be, until we change this list next year and make the 24 Bengals the all-time best team because they won a Super Bowl, 2022 will always be my number 1. They were so dominant that I drove up from Florida to every single home game. We went into that year, first-year season ticket members, with the goal of let's do 5. It was just so electrifying. It was so dominant that we had to go to every one. And the schedule played out. We made it to all 10 home games. We had 8 plus the DeMar Hamlin game, and then we had our playoff game. And it was just amazing. So 2022, we were so dominant. And we had Kappa injured, but we also had Jonah Williams with his kneecap injuries all season long. That leaving after that Cleveland Browns game, leaving Mon's house on Halloween night with Cheeto going down, it was the end of the world. Our group text was the end of the world. Go on that run, it would have been 11 straight games if the Bills game would have counted because that first quarter that we were dominating. We were gonna take them to the back, and there was going to be no more Bills ever. That was a game. And
Eric, let me ask you about this. For someone that wasn't at that game, I wasn't at that game. I was trying to illustrate that to people the other day. for the first time for me, I've been doing the social media stuff for a long time. There's always a bit of skepticism, even when we're doing good. For the first time in my whole entire tenure doing social media stuff, going into that Bills game, I feel like it was the first time that we were all on one accord and everybody knew that it was time to go and take care of business. Talk to me about like what was the atmosphere and what was it like going into that game?
Man, I'm getting chills just thinking about it now
That was
because as
incredible.
Bengals fans, we've been confident. We've been overconfident. We've been cocky. We've been arrogant. And we go in and we get our butts kicked. Andy Dalton gets it handed to him. And then we walk out saying, well, yeah, it is what it is. We take our medicine and we move on. We were confident going to that game, but you're a Bengals fan. You're still not sure. Burrow comes out and just dominates them in that first drive. And then we're getting the ball back and he's leading them down the field and he's just dominating. And I'm looking at my son, I'm like, is this real? Is this really? This is our Super Bowl year. We knew it was our Super Bowl year. And then when Damar goes down, it was just devastating because you never want to see that happen to anybody on a football field. But the energy that it took from the stadium, like, man, I feel like that, our year didn't end there, but it sure didn't propel us anywhere. That game was going to propel us to a number 1 seed, no coin flips, all of our games in Cincinnati. And so we're going to get that back this year. But man, that was just, Jake was there. That was just something else. And we were kind of all just stunned having to not even get to play the game.
I remember telling everybody, I said, or going into this, I know we got to go to the next one. I remember telling everybody going into that game, I said, Joe Burrow's about to show y'all what an MVP looks like. Because you remember at that time, that was still a discussion. So on his resume, he would have said, I took out Mahomes, I took out Allen, I got a number, like all MVPs have a number 1 or number 2 seed. So we would have had the number 2 seed. Most likely you win that game. Everything I felt like was like leading up for that moment. That was almost like his showcase. And I always feel selfish about it because I know that Damar Hamlin's life is far more important. But I always think about what if that game would have just played out and he would have won that game. The 2022 season, I think, goes a little bit different. And I really feel like it goes hand in hand with the coin flip game and the injuries and all these different things. Had he just shown the world like he was the best right there in that spot, which has never happened in Bengals. Every time we get in that big moment and it's time to go put on a show, it's like we always fall flat on our face. And that was the first time I was like, watch this. And I hated that. I'm sorry. I just had to speak on that game.
One last thing I just want to say real quick. The 2021 team, we went to the Super Bowl. We still didn't get respect. People are like, it's a fluke. It's fluky. Bengals got lucky. But when they went on that run in 2022, people started thinking, man, the Bengals are a real problem. The Bengals are a real problem. That's why that team, I love the 2022.
Well, and
all right, ready to go.
One last point just to feed off of that. That's why 2022 is better than 2021 because nobody expected us in 21. We got their best in 22 and they still couldn't stop us. Right. So that's why one of the reasons I put them ahead.
Good point. All right. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. I mean, guys, when we look back at the wide receivers, I mean, the Bengals really are wide receiver U. I mean, when you talk about some of the best receivers that have played in each decade, you could talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Even when we weren't good, we had good receivers. Back in the 90s, when we were awful, we had good receivers. This is a great list. Mon, I'm going to let you start this one off here. You can see the top 5. We got Chad 1, AJ 2, Pickens 3, Jamar 4, and Isaac Curtis 5. Mon, what do you think about this list?
Okay, look at this list right now. As it is right now, I like the top 5. I think Chase can end up at number 1 at the end of his career. But as it's constructed right here, I have no problem with Chad and AJ. Carl Pickens is polarizing. Some people don't think he needs to be there. I'll tell you why he needs to be there. Carl Pickens played on some of the worst Bengal teams ever.
Yes.
Ever. And guess what? Every team knew he was the Bengals. Jeff Blake is a good quarterback, but Jeff Blake was not an elite, top talent. He's a good quarterback, though. Don't get me wrong. Carl Pickens was the Bengals. Every team knew we got to shut him down. We got to shut him down. Guess what? They couldn't do it. He was that good and that dominant. I know he burned a lot of bridges. He pissed off a lot of people. But Carl Pickens was one hell of a football player. He did have Darnay Scott, good player also. But Carl Pickens was arguably the best wide receiver for 3 or 4 years there, and nobody could stop him. Everybody knew, hey, man, you stop Carl Pickens, you beat the Bengals. Carl Pickens would put up 200 a game, and he was something else. I have no problem with this top 5. Isaac Curtis played in the 70s. They didn't throw the ball a lot. They rewrote some rules because of his speed. Amazing player. I love him. Jamar Chase could easily be number 1 by the end of his career. He really could be. And I just like the top 5 the way it is.
Jamar Chase won a Super Bowl this year and have like I'll tell you this. I'll take it a step further. If Jamar Chase would have caught that game-winning touchdown in that Super Bowl game on the last play on 4th and 1, I'll probably move him at number 2 already just off that. Like it may be even number 1. So
maybe 1.
But I have no problem with this list. This is a good list to me.
I agree. I think this is a great list. I have no disagreement with any of these. Again, I just want to say this off of what Mon said. Carl Pickens, if you guys did not get a chance to watch him play, yes, I know he rubbed people the wrong way sometimes, but Carl Pickens, he was one of the best players in that decade. I'm not talking about on the Bengals. I'm talking about in the NFL. He was one of the best wide receivers in that decade. He was so good, guys. And like Mon said, unfortunately for him, he was in a bad time with not a lot of help. I mean, obviously Jeff Blake, he was a good football player. He wasn't an elite quarterback, but he was a great football player. But Carl Pickens was on some really bad teams, and Carl Pickens single-handedly won us games by himself. He was that good. But I have no problem with this. Obviously, Chad, I think those first 2 guys, if we don't see injuries and we don't see some of the stuff that happened at the tail of their career, I think you're talking about Chad and AJ as possible future Hall of Famers without those injuries and all that other stuff. I agree with you, Zim. I think Jamar Chase and Mon, I know you said too, I think Jamar Chase is easily going to be 1 in the next year or 2. He'll be number 1. I think he is just that good of a player. He is elite. I think he's right up there with Justin. I think him and JJ are the two best receivers in the NFL. And I don't even think I'd put one ahead of the other. I think they're both that good of football players. I think the one thing, obviously, that Jamar has that those other guys didn't is a guy named Joe Burrow. And as long as those 2 are together and stay healthy, Jamar Chase is going to be 1 very, very soon. I want to throw out here, too, I was a huge Eddie Brown fan, guys. If you guys didn't get a chance to see Eddie Brown play, he was a hell of a football player. Eddie Brown is one of my favorite Bengal receivers of all time. I just want to throw him out here. He's not in the top 5, but I just want to throw him out there because he was a hell of a player for the Bengals.
So he's not in the top 5, but before we move on, I will round out the list for everybody. At 10, Jay has T. Higgins, who could quickly move up that list. Mm-hmm. At 9, we have Darnay Scott, the T. Higgins to Jamar for Carl Pickens.
Yep.
He played alongside Carl Pickens for many years. Eddie Brown comes in at 8, TJ Hushmanzada at 7, and Chris Collinsworth at 6. So
I got no problem with that list either. That's a good list.
That
His
is
10 is on point. I have no problem with that list.
Yeah, and you gotta look at this top 10 list and say the Bengals have always had great wide receivers. They've always been good at getting those diamonds in the rough. Chad and TJ were not first round picks. T. Higgins wasn't a first round pick. We're able to pull these talents out, and that makes you excited about these guys like Yoshi and Jermaine. Oh man, I listened to that interview that Zim sent that Dan Hoare did. I'm ready to run through a brick wall to watch Jermaine Burton play.
I just left a space before I came here, and I sent out a public service announcement to everyone. And I said, if you keep on seeing on your timeline, and I knew it was other fans of other teams in there, I was like, if y'all see that, hey, look, the Bengals are going to lose T. Higgins and they're going to lose Jamar Chase and all that, I'm just here to let y'all know. I don't think that the Bengals are going to be some unstoppable force known to man, but we're always going to have weapons. So all this concept of once Joe Burrow once he loses this guy, it's over. They're just going to go get more. They're going to get another guy after that and another guy after that. So y'all got to figure out a different storyline other than let's figure out how Chase isn't going to practice today or how T. Higgins might get traded or something. Whatever happens is going to happen, but the Bengals going to have weapons, and ain't nobody in the world can stop that. That's the way Mikey was taught to run this thing, and that's the way he's carrying it out with his family, and that's what it's always going to be. We don't even claim T.O., and T.O. like had big games for us. Like, think about that. Like, any other fan base be like, yeah, T.O. was a Bengal. Like, we had so many wide receivers, we don't even claim T.O.
Agreed. All right, let's go on to the next list here. Let's see what do we got next here, Eric. Here we go. Here's the one. Here's the running back list. Again, I know I am going to rub some people the wrong way. I'm going to start with this one, guys, because probably none of you are going to agree with me on this. To me, I said it on our show already a couple weeks ago, James Brooks is number one. I'm just going to say it. James Brooks is number one for me. I think he is. And again, I know Corey Dillon, and we talked about this on our shows, and I'm going to let you chime in on this one next because Mon and I went back and forth about the Corey Dillon along with Eric. But to me, James Brooks had almost the exact same career with about 300 or 400 less touches, Zim. And again, not that I'm trying. Hang on, let me find my numbers here. And not that I'm trying to sway you, Zim, but let me just throw this out here real quick. The Dillon Brooks. So this is total. This is their total stats. Okay, this is receiving and running the football in their careers. Corey Dillon first. 9,543 yards and 50 touchdowns, okay, on almost 2,100 attempts. Touching the ball almost 2,100 times, 9,543 yards, 50 touchdowns. James Brooks, Zim, 9,459 yards, so just over 100 yards more than James Brooks total. James Brooks had 64 touchdowns, 14 more than Corey Dillon, and did it on almost 400 less attempts, Zim. And I know you weren't around for the James Brooks times, but let me just tell you, Zim, before there was Corey Dillon, there was a guy named James Brooks, and James Brooks, to me, is number one on this list. Corey Dillon 2, give me Joe Mixon 3. What do you think, Zim?
I think that is a disgusting take, Jake. Corey Dillon is one of the greatest running backs in the history of football to me. He played on some really, really bad teams. He probably has about 1,500 more yards than James Brooks. I do appreciate you breaking it down the way that you did. I think the multiple use of James Brooks and stuff, I factor that into. Yeah, I don't even really have too much of an argument against like Corey Dillon. You know, he goes on, he wins a championship with the Patriots, but he just played on some bad teams, and he's just always, it's clock killing. It's clock killing CD, bro. And the only one that I don't agree with on this one, and this is because this is going to show my age too, but I'm a big Cedric Benson fan. And I know that he didn't stay here the whole time, whatever, but I don't know enough about Pete Johnson. I said it's in my top 5 for like 2 years on Twitter. People will probably remember Sid Benson was like my pro football, was my Abby and stuff like that. So, but I got Corey Dillon like as my number. I like the list. I just don't know enough about Pete Johnson for me to move him in 5 over my guy Sid Benson, one of my favorite running backs.
A stat on that, Zim, Cedric Benson is 6th on Jay's list. And one of his things is despite playing only 4 seasons with the Bengals, he ranks 6th on the franchise's career rushing list with 4,176 yards.
Listen,
That's just crazy.
That was a great Bengal pickup. I mean, we talk about great Bengal pickups. Cedric Benson, when the Bengals went and got him from the Bears, that was an incredible pickup because he was very good for 4 years. He helped carry the Bengal team through some rough times. That before Mon goes, because I know Mon's chomping, let me just say this, Zim.
Y'all remember when we won the division? Yeah, I had to. Y'all remember when we swept the division? Y'all remember that year? What is that, 2008 or something like that?
2009.
2009.
That's one of my favorite. I have some great stories from that. I was in this bar with these Steelers people, whatever, when we won the division, and I just remember just falling in love with running the football, Cedric Vincent, and the way we did it that year. Like somebody in the chat was like, "You got to go back and go." Y'all need to go back and look at that 2009 team. We ran through the division running the football, and we swept the whole division.
Let me say this real quick, Mon. Let me just throw this out here real quick, just for Zim, just for my guy Zim. Yes, Dylan had almost 1,500 yards more rushing, but he also had over 500 more carries, Zim. Over 500 more carries. All right, Mon, what do you think?
Okay, I've already said this a million times. James Brooks is my all-time favorite Bengal. Not even close. He's my all-time favorite. He's third on this list.
No.
Jake, he played some of the best talent in football. He played with some of the best talent. Corey Dillon played on some of the worst Bengal teams in history. He's like Carl Pickens. Everybody knew we got to stop Corey Dillon, and they still couldn't do it. That game where he set the NFL rushing record, we threw for 15 yards. And he still ran for
whatever. For that many. I don't know if we threw for that many.
Corey Dillon was that
Mitchell,
dominant.
baby.
Joe Mixon's second. Then I got James Brooks. You see a lot of comments here. I understand a lot of these guys were polarizing. They weren't very like Carl Pickens. Corey had some issues with the media and the fans. Guys, let's just keep it at football talent. Let's just forget about the other stuff. Football talent-wise, those guys were unbelievable. Corey Dillon, Hall of Famer. He needs to be number one. Joe Mixon, man, I love this guy. He came back to Cincinnati to do a football camp. He doesn't even play for us anymore. He plays for the Texans. All right, and James Brooks, like I said, my all-time favorite Bengal, the greatest trade in Bengal history. We got him for nothing. And he was a phenomenal player. Rudy Johnson, I do like him, man. He was like a bowling ball bouncing off people. And Pete Johnson, I do remember him. He was you couldn't stop him. You could not stop him. He was just that big of a man. Jack Lambert of the Steelers was afraid of him. Yeah, that one time. I know you have to bring it up.
The 49ers
listen,
3 times.
I'm having a bad night.
Don't bring it up.
I need happiness. I
won't rehash that. I'm just excited T. Brookie agrees with me tonight. Thank you, T. Brookie, for finally agreeing with me. I appreciate it, T. Brookie.
All right.
So obviously, I know you guys don't agree with me on the James Brooks thing, but I'm going to stand here for James. He is my guy. That is my number one. All right, let's go on to the next list. Eric, let's see what we got next. So we've done receivers, running backs,
quarterbacks,
the best team.
Let me see
and
if
now,
I can get to it.
Let's see if we can get to there it is.
So
there
just
it is.
Before you get to it, because we do have people listening on audio, I want to make sure they hear who we're discussing. The top 5 on the list, Ken Anderson is number 1, Boomer Esiason is 2, Joe Burrow is 3, Carson Palmer is 4, and Andy Dalton is 5. Sam, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. Kick us off.
I like the list. Jay is on point. Y'all didn't get to look. I don't got that much time. The list that I want to get to is the next one, I believe. But that's
what
the one that
let's get to it.
That coaching one is the hot ticket one. To me, on this one, I don't got a problem with this one either. I think Joe Burrow could change all that. He could have changed that if he would have won. I'd have probably put him at number 1 at that point. But until he wins a bowl, I just can't get him past those guys. I don't. I'm with you. I don't care about the Carson Palmer off the field stuff. When he was playing and he was healthy before the elbow, before whatever, he was that guy to me. Dalton, I respect what he's done. I wasn't a big Dalton fan when he played. I would probably move him out and put Jeff Blake right there at 5. But it's not like a heavy argument for me because I think a lot what Jeff Blake couldn't do underneath in some of the short stuff and just taking the simple stuff. Those are the things that Dalton did really well. You got to respect Dalton coming in, 2nd round pick, going straight to the playoffs and all these different things, changing the course of it or whatever. For me, I go Jeff Blake on that one, but I don't know. It's not a big argument.
And he does have
Jim, give us your coaching one. I know you got to leave in a couple minutes. Give us your coaching one.
All right,
the coaching one. I don't know if you have that one ready and pulled up, but the coaching one for me, Zach Taylor is barely 5 for me, and I took a lot of hit for this online or whatever. What Marvin Lewis did, for this team is so like people are living in, and I think they took this the wrong way. Now, Zach Taylor has the path to go and be number one. He could be number one. He won a bowl, I'm moving right up. But a lot of different things. One of my key points is this. If Marvin Lewis at any point had Joe Burrow in the 2005 or the 2015 teams that we just outlined, that alone tells you a lot. There's not a person on earth that doesn't think that they win a Super Bowl just off that. Just give him Burrow for 2005, 2015. I wrote this out too because I wanted to make sure I was prepared. I will say this. Marvin drafted better. He gave the Bengals an identity. I don't even know still to this day, what is the Bengals' identity outside of Joe Burrow? Because when he was gone, it's like, what are we really, right? I thought he gave us an identity. Sometimes it was bad because, it reared its ugly head in 2015. He took the Bengals from the dumpsters of the 90s. So fans like myself I was a kid. I don't even know that. Marvin Lewis transitioned a lot of us into this Ocho Cinco thing. He had no upgraded facilities. There was no practice bubble. All this stuff that y'all talking about like right now with Zach Taylor, there was no practice bubbles. There was none of that. The financial backing and stuff wasn't there. All these horror stories that you hear about all these players and stuff like that back then or whatever. My number one point, like I said, no Joe Burrow. People talk about the playoff stuff. 2005, if Carson Palmer plays, I would eliminate that whole conversation because I would have playoff wins. 2015, Dalton plays, I would eliminate that conversation. The one thing I will say is all of those seasons, no playoff wins. Yes, I concede. You're right. If he's as good as I say he is, then he would do it. But I also would say if Zach Taylor didn't have Joe Burrow, you'd probably be in the same spot and we'd be talking about a 33-year curse. The community work that Marvin Lewis did, Marvin Lewis actually has a coaching tree. He had no access to free agent spending. And lastly, his resume. I know that this is nasty and this is disgusting, but he actually did win a Super Bowl with the Ravens. And the biggest proponent and the biggest component of that team was the defense, which Marvin Lewis led. And I know that that's not with the Bengals, but that's a part of his resume. For people to put Zach Taylor ahead of him, and I look at the Super Bowl, I want to punch someone. I'm sorry. It makes me so upset because I'm weird and I rewatch it. It makes me so upset to watch Zach Taylor run for 6 yards of carry and get away from the run. Watch Joe Burrow hurt his leg in that game, and they still want to like throw the football. I watched Zach Taylor commit some of the same mistakes, which he does correct. I love his playbook. I love all these different things about him, but his feel for the game, I just don't know about. Marvin Lewis did make a lot of clock, errors and different things like that I'm not scapegoating or whatever. Remember, I'm not saying Marvin Lewis is number one, but he's certainly ahead of Zach Taylor for me. And I just don't see the argument for it. I like Zach Taylor without Burrow coming into the season was 4-20. And then he went 4-3 with Jake Browning. He was 4-20 without Joe Burrow. Come on, bro. And then 2 weeks ago, when people said pitcher's going to take some of the play calling thing, why do you think everybody was so excited? They were like, oh, whew, we don't have to have Zach Taylor calling plays no more. He's not a top 5 quarterback on this list. Coach on this list, bro. I'm sorry. And I believe in Zach. Moving forward, I think he's going to be amazing. I think his customer service is awesome. I think what he does around going bar to bar is awesome. I think everything about him from being a direct to the people, everything about his customer service and his communication skills is everything that Marvin Lewis wasn't. But if there was no Marvin Lewis, you wouldn't even have a Zach Taylor with the facilities, the free agent spending, and the access to funds. You wouldn't. Like, that's like me, it's the foundation of how we're even here right now. And that would be my argument for Marvin Lewis. And at the end of Marvin Lewis, he sucked. But I can't, I can't forget about like what we did before then and where we were. If you didn't have Marvin Lewis, people would be talking about us like we're the Browns. You ain't won no divisions. You ain't did none of that stuff. Like you went decades without it. The Browns gone, 20-something years without winning it? You'd be in the same spot, I would think. And Zach Taylor without Joe Burrow, I'm not trying to limit him to that, but that is a big piece of his puzzle when you talk about him going to a Super Bowl.
Yeah. And In his article, but one of the main reasons that Zach is above him is because of his playoff winning percentage. And yeah, you can't separate him from Burrow. And if you do, like you said, we're not in the playoffs. We're probably not winning. One of the big things that people, there's a lot of young Bengals fans now. It's cool to be a Bengals fan, but Marvin, it wasn't cool to be a Bengals fan, in the late 2008, 2009. There was a point where Marvin might not come back, and he went to Mike Brown and said, "You got to give me more control." And he made Mike Brown change his ways. And if Marvin never did that, we might be talking about the Bengals legitimately leaving Cincinnati because the stadium lease is coming up and we don't have a good quality team on the field. You have to add that in. So I don't disagree with you. I think Zach is he's going to be a product of Joe Burrow for his whole career, and he'll be the best Bengals coach ever because he'll have 5 Super Bowls. But, it is what it is. Mon, what do you think?
He wins one. I got to go, guys. But if he just wins one, he shoots right up to the top of the list. But until he does it, I'm going to tell you like how all of my ops tell me online. Did you win it? Did you close the deal? It's okay. I mean, you guys won a prize for second place. I hear that every day in my life, and I'm going to apply that to the situation. And he had every opportunity to win that game. Awuzie gets the interception. The play calling, the fourth down early in the game, going for it. I just don't like any of that stuff, and I cannot forget that. And I'm very sorry, even though I believe in him moving forward. Thank you very much, guys, for letting me come on here and cook for us.
See you, buddy.
I love y'all.
We'll see you in Spaces. We'll see you in Spaces.
Thanks, bud.
Eric, I agree with a lot what he said. I don't have no problem with number 1. I would put Marvin number 2, and I'll tell you why. It's going to be controversial. I was so critical of his primetime record. Never won a playoff game. The Bengals their primetime record was horrible under him. He took over a team. The Bengals, for 10 years, the lost decade, they were the worst team in the NFL. They were the worst sports team in America, winning percentage-wise. NBA, MLB, NHL, CFL. They had the worst winning percentage of any sports team. That's how bad the Bengals were. They had 10 top 10 picks or picks in the first 8 picks in the NFL draft for 10 years in a row. So all those other coaches inherited premium picks. They didn't do anything with them. He came in and he changed the culture. He modernized the Bengals. It wasn't overnight, but he did it slowly. And you're right. He planted the seed to what is currently happening with the Bengals now. He built confidence, and Mike Brown got along with him. And he got Mike Brown to slowly change. And I think Marvin Lewis was that important. I put Forrest Gregg 5, and I'll tell you why. He inherited a very good Bengal team. Yeah, they had 2 losing seasons in a row.
That's right.
But the 70s Bengals, the 70s Bengals were 11-3, 10-4, 10-4, 9-5. Right. Then they finally went to a 16-win season. He came in hard-nosed. He got that good team over the hump. They finally started beating the Steelers. His first year in Cincinnati in 1980, he swept the Steelers. And the Steelers were coming off the Super Bowl. So that changed the culture. Then he went to the Super Bowl the next year. Great coach, but I put him at number 5. I'm going to put Sam Weish at 3. Sam Weish, we love him. But on his coaching staff, he had Dick LeBeau, who invented the zone blitz, and he invented the no huddle. I mean, the innovations in Cincinnati during that era, you still see in the NFL right now, and it's all under Sam Weish. And, of course, I'm going to put Zach Taylor at 4. I think he could move up. I like what Coach Taylor has done. But to me, Marvin Lewis is number 2. And I know a lot of people won't agree with that. I get the downside, but what he did for this organization, guys, we were so bad. And what he did, he didn't just make the football team better. He built it from the ground up. He really did. He modernized the Bengals, and you have to give him credit for it.
I agree. Listen, I think, first of all, I'm with you 100%. Forrest Gregg is 5 on this list. There's no way Forrest Gregg is 2. He inherited an incredible Bengals roster. Again, like you said, Mon, it's not like he took over a organization that was in the dump. I mean, the Bengals were one of the best teams in the AFC. Unfortunately, they were just in the same division as the Pittsburgh Steelers. For me, I agree. I think Marvin is up higher on this list. Listen, Marvin is definitely the savior of this organization. I think he was around for a little bit too long. I think 16 years was a long time. That's a long time for any coach. I think Marvin there's a couple knocks on him. Obviously, his playoff record is a big issue. The primetime thing is a big issue. There was a lot of disciplinarian issues on his teams. There was a lot of issues off the field with his teams, and I think he gets knocked for that too. But I agree with you, Mon. He is definitely top 3. I don't know where I would put these guys because, again, Marvin had a lot of talent, but there was a lot of inconsistency with Marvin's teams. A lot. It was we had that good 5-year span, and then it was bad again. And so the inconsistency, especially before that. I mean, even before that, when you look at, the 2005 team and then what happened, and then we get to the 2009 team, and it was just all over the place with him. It was very, very inconsistent with his teams. I don't see the knock on Zach Taylor though. Let's remember this. Yes, Zach has had Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL. I'll say that. I don't care what anyone else says. He's the best quarterback in the NFL when he's healthy. But look what Zach Taylor did this past year. And I think that is getting overlooked in this conversation because Zach Taylor played the hardest schedule that the NFL has seen in the last 30 years with Jake Browning at quarterback and almost made the playoffs. I mean, so before we start throwing this Joe Burrow thing and Zach Taylor thing, the same thing that Marvin Lewis did, when we talk about that in 2003, where he kind of builds it from the bottom, that's exactly what Zach Taylor has done. Remember, that Marvin Lewis team he took over was awful. I mean, the roster was awful, Mon. And Zach Taylor has built it to be one of the best rosters in the NFL. Zach Taylor is third on this list, Mon, because in the short time that Zach Taylor has been a Bengals coach, he has accomplished more than most of the guys on this list. I'm not saying he's better. I'm just saying he's accomplished more. I mean, 2 straight AFC championships. There's a lot of things that he has done that these other guys can't say they have, Mon. And I think that's why Zach's up there.
I agree with you. Everything you said is very valid. Not a knock on Forrest Gregg. He was a hell of a coach. The Bengals had two rough seasons. He had 78, 79. The Bengals were really bad. Okay, Kenny Anderson broke his arm, but they still had a lot of talent, a lot of good players from those 70s teams. I know I'm old. I just want people to understand something. The Bengals were considered top 3 NFL team in the 70s. I mean, you talk Cowboys, Raiders, Bengals, Steelers. You can make an argument, any of those teams. That's how good the Bengals were. Yeah. All right. And then they had 2 lean seasons. They fired Homer Rice, who passed away today, rest in peace. And they hired Forrest Gregg. And Forrest Gregg came in, won 6 games his first year, beat the Steelers twice. And then the Bengals took off in 81. But here's the problem. That Bengal team got really old quick. And then Sam Weish came in and inherited a depleted old Bengal team. And he started drafting David Fulcher's, Timmy McGee's, Eddie Brown's, really good players. And Sam Weish, he gets a lot of credit. He doesn't get enough credit for what he did in Tampa. Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, Warwick Dunn. He had a lot of say-so in drafting those guys that led to Tony Dungy.
That's a great point.
Jay Gruden winning a Super Bowl. A lot of those guys were drafted by Sam Weish. He doesn't get enough credit for what he did in Tampa Bay also. But, yeah, I think Zach Taylor could wind up in the top 2. Marvin Lewis, guys, I get it. I was so frustrated with him. His primetime record was horrible. But he deserves to be number 2. Eric, your take. We didn't really get to talk about the quarterbacks that much.
Yeah, let's talk about the quarterbacks afterwards. But let's get your take real quick, Eric.
Well, I mean, you got Paul Brown. Nobody's going to argue that. Just to comment on Zach Taylor, the stuff that Marvin Lewis did, like I said, he changed this. He's the person we can thank for the Bengals not actually possibly leaving Cincinnati. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be who we are today. But we talk about Zach Taylor being carried by Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and that's fine and dandy, but you got to give him a lot of credit for being the coach that he is. It's 2024. It's not the same type of football that we had 20 years ago. You have to coach these athletes a lot different. Jake, you know that. This generation is not the same as it was when we grew up, when they, every coach was hard nosed. Every coach called you names. Every coach made you run laps. These coaches now, Zach Taylor gets it. He's younger. He's younger and closer to their generation, but he gets that you got to talk to every player differently, and you have to manage personalities, and you have to be personable. And the big thing that we don't give him credit for, we talk about all the play calling, we talk about everything on the field, but the reason that free agents are coming to Cincinnati, it's not all Joe Burrow. It's when they talk to Bengals players, they hear about all these little things that our coaching staff does, giving them that extra day off, giving them, a little bit more rest, working around their schedules so that they don't have to, when it's not inconvenient to the team, they don't have to get overworked. And he's got to get a lot of credit for that, because this is a cool place to come play, and players want to come play because they talk to these guys and they hear how well they're treated by their coaching staff. None of the guys leave saying that coach hated me, that coach did me wrong. We saw some TikTok videos of how some of these college coaches cut players, and that's Zach Taylor's the polar opposite. He would never do anything like some of these arrogant coaches do, and that's what's going to make him a multiple-time Super Bowl winning champion, because people are going to take less money to come play with him, for him, and with Joe Burrow. That's my
I agree. Let me say this one more time. Let's go to the quarterbacks real quick before we get out of here. But let's not forget, Sam Weiss took over this football team in 1984 and drafted a young man named Boomer Esiason in a situation, guys, where a Hall of Fame quarterback was the starting quarterback at that time. Sam Weiss made one of the greatest draft picks. Now, don't get me wrong, Mon. I know the first round was not good, but what Sam did in finding a Jim and Boomer Esiason to replace Kenny Anderson eventually cannot be overlooked. That was a great start to his coaching career in Cincinnati. Best quarterbacks, Mon. I mean, again, I have a hard time arguing this. Joe Burrow is going to be at the top of this list very, very soon. There's no doubt about it. I think you could even move Joe Burrow probably ahead of Boomer Esiason if you really wanted to at this point. And I'm a huge Boomer fan. He's one of my favorite Bengals of all time. But that top three is 100% the case. I know Zim thinks Jeff Blake maybe 5 instead of Andy Dalton. But what are your thoughts, Mon, on that top 5?
I don't have a problem with it. Like some of the other lists, Burrow has a chance to go to number 1. I don't have a problem at all. I know we need to keep emotion out of it about the way he left. Carson Palmer, before the knee injury, was trending to be an all-time great.
Yeah, he was.
He was so dominant in 2005. I hated the way he left. I honestly, he makes me sick when he bangs on the Bengals now in his retirement. But as a player with Cincinnati, I think he's deserving of top 5. Kenny Anderson was phenomenal. The first NFL, the West Coast offense originated in Cincinnati. Quick history lesson: Greg Cook separated his shoulder. The medicine back then, they misdiagnosed it. He could never play again. Greg Cook was going to be an Hall of Famer. Well, Bill Walsh, who was a Bengals assistant coach, had to develop a new offense. He had a quarterback named Virgil Carter. He developed the West Coast offense. Well, he perfected it with Kenny Anderson. Kenny Anderson came in, NFL passing champion. The guy was unbelievable. Like I said, the Bengals are 11-3, 10-4, 10-4, playing in the same division or the conference as the Dolphins, as the Raiders. Division that, the Browns were good, the Oilers were good, the Steelers were good. The Bengals had great teams led by Kenny Anderson. Boomer, charismatic, great leader. Him and Burrow remind me of each other. I mean, think about it. Those guys were just, alpha males. They carried their team. They were just, tough guys. Boomer, one of my greatest memories of Boomer is coming back after he left, went to the Jets and the Cardinals, and he came back that 7-game span where he took over in 96. He was phenomenal. Here's another what if, Jake. What if he would have gotten Neil O'Donnell's contract and came back 98 and 99 and played for the Bengals? He decided to go do Monday Night Football. It's another what if. Burrow, love him to death. I mean, the guy, he's got it. And Andy Dalton, he was a point guard. He was a limited quarterback, and he maximized his talent with a great Bengal team. Here's another what if. Carson Palmer was frustrated. He was leaving the Bengals because they weren't doing enough to build a great roster. Guess what happened? Carson Palmer leaves. Andy Dalton takes him to 5 consecutive playoff appearances. Is it safe to say, Jake, Eric, do you guys believe this? I mean, the statement of mine? Andy Dalton had half the talent Carson Palmer did.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a factual statement.
That's
half the talent. And he took the Bengals to 5 playoffs. What would have Carson done with that team?
Right. If Carson had a little bit of patience and could have had the foresight to see that A.J. Green was coming in, one of Andy Dalton's worst traits was he would throw A.J. Green to the sideline and often out of the sideline. Carson didn't make those throws. He threw him. He led the guy up the sideline. He never threw him out of bounds. I mean, we would have won those playoff games.
Willie Anderson, I remember him tweeting this, and he said it. He tried to convince Carson to cool his jets and calm down. The Bengals were building a great team. Carson didn't want to hear it. He should have listened to Willie Anderson. He should have listened to him.
Well,
the Bengals were building a juggernaut.
That's what I was going to say is that I think, yes, Andy Dalton had half of the talent as Carson Palmer, but Andy Dalton was 100 times better leader than Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer's leadership ability was not good, gentlemen. It just wasn't. And Andy Dalton's was. I mean, I think Andy Dalton was a quiet guy. He wasn't a screamer or yeller, but you never heard players talk bad about Andy Dalton. The guy was a leader. And that's the reason why he had the success he did, is because, yes, he was a point guard, but being that point guard, all those guys followed him. And I think his leadership ability, if Carson Palmer had half of his leadership ability, Carson Palmer would be a Hall of Fame quarterback. The one thing Carson Palmer was missing was that leadership ability that Andy Dalton had. You got to put Andy Dalton on this list, though. I mean, the guy is he's what is he, top 2, top 3 all-time Bengal passer? I mean, you got to put Andy Dalton on this list. Where he belongs between him and Carson Palmer, I don't know. To me, that the 4 and 5 is a toss-up because, yes, Carson was a better football player, but Andy Dalton was a much better leader. It's a shame what happened with Carson. I agree with you, Mon. He was one of my favorite Bengals at that time, and he was the savior. He was the savior, so to speak, when Marvin drafted him. And it's just a shame. After that injury, he was just never the same.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I mean, we have a luxury here. I mean, knock on wood, this list isn't going to change for the next 12, 13 years. It's going to change not in the faces, just in the ranking. Burrow's going to go to 1 here very soon, but you're not. This isn't going to change. We have our franchise quarterback. So to Mon's point earlier, if Boomer doesn't take that Monday Night Football job, he's on number 1 on this list, and he's probably in the Hall of Fame already. He was just a couple years short of the stats needed, because the only left-hand quarterback with better stats than him in the Hall of Fame is Steve Young, I believe.
It's Steve Young. Yep.
He's right now the second best left-handed quarterback statistic-wise, maybe not winning Super Bowls, but statistic-wise out there. So Boomer would have been number 1. So it's a shame that he got traded away and we went the Klingler route. And it's a shame that, it played out where Monday Night Football threw a bunch of cash at him. That didn't quite work out as well, but I think it's worked out for his family. So think
about this. Maybe if Boomer stays, there's no Achilles Smith.
Oh, how many what ifs? I mean, that's play action. So, and the other thing that you got to jump on too. So Boomer's play action was lights out, but we talk about not having a great offensive line. but he had Willie Anderson, and your right tackle is your blindside protector for Boomer. You got Corey Dillon, Willie Anderson, and Burrow for another 3 years. I mean, Boomer for another 3 years. Yeah, we might have had a whole different early 2000s setup for us. So
quickly, just we're talking about all-time greats. You know what killed the Cincinnati Bengals? That '88 team that Jake loves. They had the best offensive line in football, and it wasn't even close. Unfortunately, they had one number one pick on that team, on that offensive line. That was Munoz. Not unfortunately, he's a Hall of Famer. He's that good. Everybody else was a 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th round pick. I mean, the NFL draft was more than 7 rounds. They were all late round picks, and the Bengals were just so good at drafting late round picks. Well, guess what? They thought they could do that every year. They thought they could replace these players with 7th, 8th, 9th rounders. It didn't work. And that led to the lost decade. They had the worst. They went from the best offensive line in football to arguably the worst for about 7, 8 years. And that's what caused them to be putrid for that 10-year period. And then Marvin luckily came along and changed that. And it is what it is.
A lot of what ifs, but we're
a lot of what ifs. But this is a fun show. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys did too. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. That is another edition of the Bengals Pulse. Guys, don't forget, get your tickets for Jungle Jam coming up here. Our buddy Bengal Jim, friend to the show, he is putting on the Jungle Jam July 20th. Again, you get your tickets for $20. Make sure you guys check out. It's going to be incredible. The list of players, a lot of guys we just talked about are going to be there. So check it out, guys. And the QR code is right there on our screen. But you can go on to Bengal Jim's Twitter page, I think, as well, right, Eric, and find the QR code.
Yeah, and we retweeted it out not too long ago, but I'll retweet it out again tonight or tomorrow. They're going to sell out here pretty quickly. It's the event that you don't want to miss. I'm really suffering from fear of missing out. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it up, but you got to get there. If you're anywhere near and you can get there, you got to get there. This is going to be the event of the year. They're having it over in Newport on the levee there. That is just a fantastic area. And the way they talk about having it set up and the people that are the players, the commitments there, the people that haven't officially committed that sounds like are committing, guys, it's going to be amazing. So get your tickets while they can because they're going to be gone very soon.
Agreed. Check it out. I mean, obviously, Bengal Jim, he always puts on a great program and a great show. So, all right, guys, that is another edition of the Bengals Pulse. As always, if you like this podcast, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Make sure you check us out on all the awesome podcast platforms, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. As always, follow Mon on Twitter at The Fire Mon. Follow me on Twitter at Coach Jake Owens 9. Follow Eric on Twitter at eFlash with 2 H's 88. Follow the Wincinnati Podcast Network on Twitter at Wincinnati Pod. And as always, follow the Bengal Pulse on Twitter at Bengals_Pulse9. The same on Instagram without the at Bengals_Pulse9. And as always, if you like this podcast, make sure you give us that 5-star review. We'd very much appreciate that. Make sure you always check out all the awesome podcasts right here on the Wincinnati Podcast Network. We want to thank our guy, Zim Hude, for jumping on tonight for this special edition of the Bengals Pulse Roundtable. Thanks, Zim. We appreciate everything you and Ace do for the show. He is Eric. He is Mon. I am Jake. This is the Bengals Pulse. Hooday, Bengal fans. We will see you next week.
See you guys.